The left versus right culture war conflagration continues to increase in temperature, and many people are asking, are we on the brink of civil war? Well, Tim Pool, when I spoke to him on my podcast, Under the Skin, available from Luminary, you can get it on Apple, link in the description, says we're already in a war. The war has begun. It's just being practiced on the level of psyche. We're in the middle of a psychological war being subtly fought through media, and sometimes not so subtly fought. An invasion of the mind, policeman of the brain. Tim Pool is a great and influential orator. Have a look at this clip from Under the Skin. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Stay to the very end because some interesting points are made. You used to say more frequently, at least as far as I'm aware, that you felt that, I guess in the final days of Trump, that America was on the brink of some kind of civil war.
I still do.
Do you?
Yeah, but there's been polling data that I think may, evolve that opinion. Notably, there was YouGov data that showed, I think it was YouGov, that there's 5 regions in the United States. There's the northeastern, there's the southern, there's the heartland, there's the west and the mountain regions. And in each region, there was a large plurality of people who wanted to secede from the Union and form their own regional governments, essentially. If you normalize for population by each state, I did the math, you end up with 37.2% of the U.S. population wanting the country to break apart. That's massive because opposition to a balkanization of the United States is comparable. It's in the third range. So you have about a third of people who are like, I don't care. You have about a little bit over a third saying, shut her down. And you have about a third saying, no, keep it as it is. And so when it comes to the yes or no vote, the people who abstain, and then you'll get, 50-50? So I don't exactly know what it would look like, though. I think people have this misconception about what civil war really means. And they also don't take into account that we're in what's referred to as 4th and 5th generational era of warfare. We don't necessarily use kinetic force to win wars. We use psychological operations, propaganda, manipulation. And so depending on how you want to define it, look, we had a guy get shot in the chest by an anti-fascist after a Trump rally in Portland. We just had a shootout in Portland just a couple of days ago. It may, the kinetic aspect of any kind of civil conflict may keep itself constrained to these left and right skirmishes in various cities. Then it simmered down a little bit. We're in kind of a lull year because politics, we just got off a presidential election. But I mean, you look now with the cyber symposium, and I see a cat, and we have the audits in Arizona. I just talked with Steve Bannon the other day, and he's talking about audits in Georgia and Wisconsin and Michigan and all these states. This is persistent. These people aren't backing down. They don't view Biden as the real president. And so if you have that rising sentiment, I'm not saying that we're going to see, one thing Bill Maher said was that there couldn't be a civil war because the Mason-Dixon line would go through Grandma's kitchen, a reference to the line that divided the North and the South. But I think that's, Americans have this issue where we view conflict or circumstances or concepts through an American lens. They don't seem to understand that the world exists, and the Spanish Civil War, for instance, the Russian Revolution, you take a look at what happened in the U.S. with state versus state, North versus South, and it's very unique to the United States based on its structure, this massive union of different jurisdictions. But you take a look at the Spanish Civil War, and you can see pockets erupting of different factions declaring different regions. So again, when I say civil war, it's I don't know. I've tried to veer away a little bit from saying civil war simply because I think people don't understand it. They assume I'm saying that California is going to declare war on Texas or something, which I don't mean that. But you could see different factions popping up. Ultimately, you could see factions forming allegiances or alliances with each other. And, ultimately, I think when people are already ready to kill each other, are already wishing for the death of each other on social media, I think we're going to go into a psychological conflict. That's what 5th generational warfare is, a reference to manipulating someone online through using fake accounts to convince them that a certain idea is popular. 4th generational warfare is is similar, but does involve physical conflict and things like that, propaganda, black ops, false flags, etc. I'm looking at Twitter, man, and I'm seeing people celebrate death, wish for death, overtly. These are verified blue check mark, high profile accounts gloating and wishing for death. And that's been escalating. So I'll put it this way. I'll put it in simple terms. In 2018, we saw Proud Boys, Antifa, right-wing, left-wing groups clashing. And it was some of the most violent conflict I'd ever seen, in the U.S. I'm not that old. I'm 35, but I had been at Occupy Wall Street. I had seen, anarchist Antifa and stuff like that. I saw people throwing M80s at old women. I saw improvised explosive devices. I wouldn't rate as too dangerous, but dangerous. Mortar shells being thrown. This was 2018. And so that's when I started saying, if this continues to escalate, because we've already seen the culture war bubbling up since Gamergate in 2013. If this continues, we're at the level of kinetic skirmishes, physical violence, then I don't see why people will back down when they're being threatened this way and the police aren't intervening. They're going to get angrier. They're going to spread more media. They're going to challenge each other more so, and the violence will continue to escalate. So I've had a few people challenge me on the notion, saying that I was completely wrong to imply that there could ever be a civil war in the United States. And this is back, 2018, 2019, 2020. First, I'll say that I first bring this up because there was an article, I believe it was in The Atlantic, where they said that they polled a dozen or so or a large number of national security experts who said that they felt a second civil war in the United States was probable, ranging from some estimates of 30%, some saying 90%. I see an article like that, and then I take that expert opinion, apply it to my own experiences, and come to an agreement. But then we see, we see a Princeton professor coming out, giving an interview, which was published in The Hill, saying we are in a cold civil war. There's a Russian oligarch who said the same thing, and this is years ago. So I remember, as of recent, I had last year during the election cycle, talking about the prospects of, what would happen if Trump did win re-election, what would happen if Biden won, and that I feel that a civil war is possible. Afterwards, I'll give one example. We had a guest who, he kind of ambushes me when we start the show, and he said, so last time I was here, you told me a civil war was coming. You said that people were going to get violent. You said things were going to break down. Well, what happened? And I simply responded, on January 6th, a large group of Trump supporters broke their way into the Capitol building to shut down the Electoral College vote. And their response was, oh, yeah, that is kind of crazy, isn't it? If I were to tell you that in 2018, based off seeing this violence, that 800 to 1,000 people would break their way into the U.S. Capitol and shut down the process by which we formalize our president, I don't think people would have believed me. They would have just said, you're crazy. So now we're dealing with many of these defendants from the Capitol riots are in solitary confinement. Their supporters are saying this is political imprisonment. These people are being mistreated. We just had Owen Schroyer of InfoWars, one of Alex Jones. I believe he works for Alex Jones. He was just arrested. Apparently, they said that he was standing on the steps, which was trespassing. So now there's another high-profile arrest. Many people on the right view this as the Democrats just trying to crush out any Trump supporters, overt acts of political oppression against against them and their ideas, and I see that as where we've gone from the culture war being an online battle between left and right or critical wokeism or whatever you want to call it, populism, MAGA, whatever. It eventually bubbled over into physical violence in the streets, which we saw for an extended period over a few years. I think ultimately culminating in, I think his name's Aaron Danielson, getting shot twice in the chest as he was leaving a Trump rally. This guy he had the Black Lives Matter tattoo on his neck, shot him twice, killed him. Then you get, obviously, Trump's government went and hunted that guy down and killed him. So the political violence is here. I know it's been worse in the past, but it kind of, I ask a lot of people, I ask, older people who come on the show, have you ever felt it this way with the hyperpolarization, the escalation of violence? They usually say no. And so where are we at now? Just this past weekend, a group of right-wing individuals, Trump supporters, were trying to put on what they called a summer of love. Anti-fascists show up and through smoke bombs and objects, then you get the right-wing groups that knew that would happen, shut up for the fight, then engage with them, and then you get roving street battles throughout Portland where the police say they refuse to intervene, and then two people end up in a shootout. People are ducking, hitting the ground, bullets are flying. And so I wondered how long it would take for us to get to the point where bullets started flying. We're at that point now. Luckily, nobody was shot. But I think people need to understand, too. For one, maybe it all ends right now. Maybe that was the moment people saw the gun battle. It was a shootout between two people in Portland and say, this has gone too far, we got to stop. I personally don't believe that because we saw Charlottesville. And even after Charlottesville, which is several years now, it's still happening and people are still fighting. And I think people need to realize that when you read the history of either the Spanish Civil War, the Russian Revolution, or Weimar Germany, it's not like it happened overnight. When people read history, they're reading this condensed version where it'll say, the Boston Tea Party happened, the Boston Massacre happened, Americans declared independence. But a lot of these people don't understand the American Revolution was 20 years long. That these famous moments like the Tea Party and the massacre were years apart from each other. We read history, we think it happened like the next week. So what I see is now 2021, gun battles in Portland. That's insane. We've got Joe Biden's approval rating among Democrats, of course, 85%, among disapproval among Republicans, 95%, but among independent voters, it's starting to collapse as well. The amount of fervor we saw against Donald Trump, 81 million votes, and I genuinely believe, I don't believe the fraud stuff. I think people anti-elected Trump, they said no to this man and they came out. So what happens in 2022 when Republicans take the House back in the US? What happens in 2024 when you get a Trump or a DeSantis? The hyperpolarization, the tribalism is not de-escalating. I wish it was, but the fundamental values and moral frameworks of both parent factions are so divergent at this point, I don't think there's a bridge crossing over. A good example is, actually, there's a story right now. A journalist was attacked by anti-fascists in, I believe it was in Portland. There's a video of it. You can actually watch the video of them calling her a slut, shoving her to the ground, spraying her with paint, and macing her. And right now, if you go on Twitter, all of left Twitter says it was actually the Proud Boys. They are so tribalist on their worldview. They will not accept fault for their own side. And obviously, I think the right has its faults. I think the Proud Boys who show up to fight are causing, equal trouble to a certain degree. And people they have their sides. They want to fight. They're not interested in what is true. They're interested in what they believe, and they're interested in confirmation bias. I think when independent voters start swinging away from Biden, which they are, and they might vote for Republicans, which I don't necessarily think solves any of the problems, you'll end up with a massive reaction on a scale much worse than we saw in 2020 with the riots, because people are entrenched. They don't want to back down from what they believe to be true or their worldview. And I think just one final thought on this, a simple way to explain the difference. I do not think you will ever see a large movement of Trump supporters embracing critical race applied principles, critical race praxis. You will see that the left will obviously be very much in favor of their vision of equity and equal outcomes and, racial quotas. The right won't do that. And so long as you have two governments, fighting over control of one centralized system where they want to implement their moral framework, I think it ultimately ends up with some kind of implosion.
Well, Tim, you've said a lot. Starting with the stuff you were saying about like the breakdown of. You can listen to the rest of that conversation on Luminary. You can get it from Apple. There's a sort of small subscription fee link in the description. I also do my podcast Above the Noise there, so you can learn a little bit of meditation too. Let me know what you thought of this conversation in the comments below. Did I ask the right questions? Did you want to see it go a little bit deeper? If you like this conversation with Tim, have a look at this conversation. Very similar, very enjoyable too. And if you want to learn a little bit more about meditation and all that kind of stuff, have a look at this video from Awakening, my side channel. I've got some sort of weird groin flare up in the middle of that. Sorry about that. I'm not doing anything weird. And sign up to my mailing list at russellbrand.com so we can keep this conversation going together. Thank you.